I will try to measure my homiletic length here because of the other ceremonies we have. But there's a marvelous teaching in this short gospel reading which we have today. It's also mentioned just one other place. It's in chapter 21 in the Gospel of Luke. John and Matthew do not mention this event where Jesus sees the poor widow and he applauds her or he admires her. When you read these readings, and we've been looking at Mark's Gospel now, remember all these last number of Sundays, Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem. Now he has arrived in Jerusalem. We're in chapter 12 in Mark here. Chapter 11, he arrived in Jerusalem, and now he's in the temple area. And he's looking at various people that come to make their contributions toward the treasury of the temple. Let me say one or two words about the temple, because we hear about it all the time. And I know many of you who've been to Jerusalem will understand it somewhat better. There is no temple anymore. In the year 70, the Romans destroyed the temple. The Romans overran this great General Vespasian, overran the whole area and destroyed the temple. So there is no longer a temple for the Jews. I know when you see Jewish synagogues called temples, technically they're not temples. A temple was a place of sacrifice. So we don't have any more priests in the Jewish tradition because the priests were there to offer sacrifice. The tribe of Levi was the priestly tribe. And since there is no more temple, there is no more sacrifice, and there are no more Jewish priests. The rabbis are people that preach the word and call the people into an assembly of prayer. It's different than the temple. So once the temple was destroyed in the year 70, there is no more temple. In Jerusalem, in the old city, there is a plateau called Mount Moriah. That's the Temple Mount. And on the plateau, on the top of this hill, there's a large space, about 40 acres. It's a very large space. And that was the Temple Mount. That's where the temple was. Now it's controlled by the Muslims, much to the tension and much to disappointment of the Jews. The Muslims control the entire 40 acres on the top of the Temple Mount. And they have there the Dome of the Rock. When you see pictures of Jerusalem, you'll see this golden dome. They have the Dome of the Rock, and then they have a huge mosque called the Alaska Mosque. On the side of the hill, Herod the Great built a supporting wall to support the hill, Mount Moriah. And the section that you see, which is commonly called the Wailing Wall, is part of this buttress wall built by Herod to support the hill. It's not part of the temple. It's supporting the Temple Mount. The section that we see when we see it in the news is a small section of the wall supporting the mount. It's about 180 feet long, and it's about 80 or 90 feet high. And that's where the Jews go to pray. And all pilgrims go to the wall. And they make little prayer in little pieces of paper, and they place it in the wall. The wall is a whole collection of limestone rocks, very large rocks. And you place your petitions. And twice a year, Rosh Hashanah and at the Passover, the custodians of the wall take all the petitions and they have them buried on the Mount of Olives. So that's the wall you see. And that's the most sacred place in the world for all Jews because they remember the temple when they pray at the wall. It's called the Wailing Wall, but Jews prefer it to be called the Western Wall of the Temple Mount. So Jesus is up on the mount here, on Mount Moriah, 40 acres. And in chapter 11, he drives out the money changers. And then in chapter 12, he has this woman that he notices. And let me tell you the teaching that I believe comes from this. It has to do with a gift from the heart, not a gift from the surplus. Now, all gifts are precious, and all gifts are a reflection of a person's generosity, but some gifts are more precious than others. And what Jesus is saying, the gift of the widow somehow was more precious than those who gave great wealth, their surplus, to the treasury at the temple. What does this mean to us? How do you find yourself in the gospel? When we read these gospels, our ideal is to say, I find myself in the gospel. I'm part of this teaching. Let me tell you two quick stories that made me part of the gospel here. When I was first ordained, I was sent to St. Fabiana's Cathedral down at 2nd and Main, down on Skid Row. And for a 24-year-old newly ordained priest, it was ideal. I mean, I was so filled with the Spirit, I was going to convert everybody and I was going to change the world. So it was marvelous. They only left me there for a year and a half, but I loved it. The first Christmas that came, I got a gift from Elsie. Now, Elsie was a homeless person. She's an African-American woman, a kind of an elderly woman, and obviously totally impoverished. She was homeless. But she gave me a gift, and the gift was a used electric razor shaving. And it didn't have the cord with it, so I couldn't charge it. I was a bit suspicious about it anyway, because it was used, and I have no idea where this came from, but it came from her heart. And it was precious to me because it came from her heart. It was a gift from the heart. I never forgot that. I've gotten many gifts since, but this gift I still remember because it was a gift from the heart. It was from her substance. She had to think about it. She had to find it. And she brought it to me, and she gave it to me like it was a bar of gold. And that was Elsie's gift. She was like the widow mentioned in the gospel. The second story comes from 1970, when Archbishop Manning took over as the Archbishop of Los Angeles, and I worked with him. And in 1970, we did the Cursillo. Now, some of you might know that did the Cursillo, and if you did, I'll say de colores. That's the greeting of the Cursillistas. And it's a very intense weekend retreat. And the Royista, the guy was leading the weekend retreat in which the Cardinal and I participated. His name was Carlos Arballo. He was a truck driver from Pico Rivera. He's a big fellow. And actually, it was the first time I ever hugged a man. And I've always been nervous about hugging men. And so, but I say, this guy's a big truck driver and he's got 5 kids. Oh, geez, I think I could hug him all right. So anyway, that was Carlos. And Carlos became a very close friend. And when Archbishop Manning was made a cardinal in 1973, Carlos was part of a little singing group, and he played the guitar. He wanted to give the cardinal something from the heart as a celebration of being made a cardinal, so he gave him his guitar, which was the most precious thing that Carlos had. No, Cardinal Manning didn't know how to play the guitar, but it was a gift from the heart. And when Cardinal Manning left the cathedral and came to Holy Family in 1985, he gave away most of the stuff he had because his lodgings here were very small, but he brought the guitar. I never forgot that. He brought the guitar to Holy Family. When he died, I gave it to the archives of the Archdiocese. Now, these are gifts from the heart. They're precious. Money can't buy these gifts. We're in a gifting season now. When a child gives you a gift, and the little 4 or 5-year-old, and it's a drawing, and you say, is that me? This has happened to me here. kids come up after Mass and they give me this piece of paper, probably doing it during the homily. And they say, is that me? And they say, that's you, Monsignor. Oh, there's something about that is very precious. See, money can't buy it. So think about that. What does a gift from the heart look like? Tell me. What do you think it looks like? It could be forgiveness. We're in a season of family. We're in a season of sharing. It could be the gift of being reconciled. It comes from the heart. Money can't buy it. It could be the gift of consoling a lonely person, of sharing the cross that another person is carrying. But it's got to be something that belongs to your spirit, belongs to your heart, something that when you share, you know you gave part of yourself. You can't buy this at Nordstrom's. Money can't buy this kind of a gift. That's what this gospel is about. And since we are in a season of gifting, I urge you to think about the most precious gifts you can give, which are gifts that come from the heart. And that's the widow. That's distinct from the person who just gave from luxury, because somehow it was required. Think about that. When we come to Thanksgiving and families sit around a table, what kind of gift are you going to bring to the family? And especially if they begin to discuss politics or religion, my God, there's going to be a war. And what kind of a gift will you bring? And when you're thinking about Christmas and what you do for your family, what kind of a gift will come from your heart? Become the widow, the person who has something very precious that is not measured by money. It's not measured by worldly things. It's measured by the manner in which I take part of myself and I share a part of myself. And Jesus teaches us in this gospel reading today that the most precious gifts are gifts that come from the heart. So when somebody gives you a gift like that, be very, very grateful. And it will occasion you, energize you, perhaps, to do likewise, to share with another a gift from the heart. Amen.